Hey, welcome back to Straw Dogs. I'm Robert Kuntz. So, today we are going to look at the character Dao in the first chapter of Dao De Jing. It's going to be pretty similar to the last video about Xuan or mystery, but we're talking about Dao. So, Dao, of course, being the first word in the name Dao De Jing. So it's an interesting character. There's lots of stuff to talk about here, but we're going to keep it short and sweet because last time we already talked about the meaning of the first chapter of the Dao De Jing, so we don't need to go through as much to be able to understand the essential character of the chapter, but we're going to go through some of the really important words in the chapter to be able to understand them from etymological perspective, which will help us to have a better grasp on what the concept of the Dao De Jing is and how it can impact our thought and in various areas of our lives. There we go. So Dao, you can see that the Dao, it's got two components. There is a left side component and a right side component. So where you see the, let me see if I can blow this up a bit just so that it's more visible exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so you can see there's a big Chinese character there, right? That's Dao. So Dao, it's got a left side component which has a dot, and then it seems like there's this little river running there, right? So this character, it's pronounced chuo. So chuo means to carry from one place to another. Then on the right, there's another character, two dots, a line, a little line, and then a box with two lines inside of it. That character is shou. That means leader or commander or first in an order. So, or head, like, your head or the head of state, right? Shou. So chuo and shou together mean the movement of the leader or the movement of the first thing. That's what Dao is. The Dao in Taoist philosophy is the primordial first movement of the universe, which generates everything in existence. So you could think of it as like the moment before the Big Bang, right? So the universe generates the Big Bang, or the Dao generates the Big Bang. But what's before the Big Bang is unknown. Let's just, okay, you have your astrophysics and so on, right? Let's get that out of the equation. Let's just say that before the creation of the universe, nobody is present to see it. Nobody knows what it is. It's hidden. It seems to be suspended in nothingness, but it creates all things. And then the universe gets created from that thing. So that's what Dao is. It's the first movement of all things coming into creation. So you got that part. Now, let's make the image a little smaller here, drag it back over, and we will take a quick look at the etymology of the term Dao. So we'll go back to our trusty 说文解字. Yeah, you remember? 说文解字. Discussing literature and explaining pictographs or explaining Chinese characters. So it says that the movement of the Dao, or the movement of the road, right? So Dao, traditionally in Chinese, means a thoroughfare or a road. So this moving Dao, it comes from chuo. So it comes from walking from one place to another, or being carried from one place to another, and shou, and leader, right? So then when that arrives there, it's called Dao. So the idea here, again, as I mentioned, carrying the leader approximately is the technical meaning of the term Dao. Now, just as a quick insight, Dao in Chinese means a road or a path, right? So if you were to go to, I don't know, Shanghai, for instance, right, you can find various highways that are called Dao, right, Great Road. Try to think of one off the top of my head. Puji Dadao, right? The Puji Great Road, which is in, I think that's a road in Shanghai. I think it's in the Pudong district, somewhat newer district. a pretty nice area, residential area of Shanghai. I'll probably go there and see my Taiji teacher there this August. So you got the basic idea. Dao is a road, right? And so Taoists and Confucians both use this term. In the Confucian Analects, the term is used by the philosopher Youzi, who may be reporting what Confucius says. He says, when the gentleman attends to what is essential, then the Tao is born, right? The road is born in front of him. So this is the idea. So Tao has this connotation of being a road or a path, but in the sense of philosophy, it's the road or path that we follow to get to the truth or get to reality, right? So there's your little bit of epistemology for the day. I'm not going to do any more epistemic thinking in this whole video, hopefully. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, so then we can better understand and better appreciate the first chapter of the Dao De Jing. Dao ke dao, fei zheng dao. So the path, which can be, let's say, named as the path, is not the constant path. Let's leave that one for a bit. Ming ke ming, fei zheng ming. The name which can be named isn't the constant name. Wu ming tian di zhi shi, right? So without a name, or non-being is named as the beginning of heaven and earth, you ming wan wu zhi mu, right? So named, it's the mother of the myriad things. Gu chang wu yu, so always without desire. Yi guan qi miao, you can see something miraculous or subtle. Chang you yu, always with desire. Yi guan qi jiao, right? You only see its border condition. Ce liang zhe tong chu er yi ming, so these two things, they emerge together and they're differently named. Tong zhi wei xuan, so together they're named mystery. Xuan zhi you xuan, mystery upon mystery. Zhong miao zhi men, and the gateway of all wonders. So all of this is referring back to the Tao, which, as we have already mentioned, is the movement of the leader. Now, you can get more complex about this. You can, if you analyze the Tao character, you can find the sun, you can find the moon, you can find a lot of different stuff in it. One of the better people in social media talking about that is Louis Kamiathi. He's got some cool YouTube videos about it, so you can go check him out if you want to know more about the meaning of the character Tao. But for our interests here on my channel, we want to break it down from the perspective of understanding what it means philosophically, so that then we can, begin to use it in our lives in various ways. So when we look at this concept of Tao, they immediately leave the topic. And one of the things we get in let's say North American, especially discourses about the Dao De Jing, is people who say, well, you can't speak the Tao, so therefore there's no conversation to be had about this. And in my opinion, that's a bit of a stick in the mud kind of behavior. That's kind of a sellout. That's sort of the same people who say that are the same kind of, people that say, I'm dangerous and loyal to a fault. It's like a meme of a typical, hold my beer boomer guy, right? If you're a boomer, listen, you're my parents' generation. I love you. I'm not, I pray for forgiveness. But all I'm saying is that, this whole idea that you can't name the Tao. Of course, you can't name the Tao. It pre-exists all of creation. There's nothing before it, right? So there's no vantage point from which to view it. Yeah, you can't give it a name. But it doesn't mean you can't understand something about it. Otherwise, the authors of the Dao De Jing would have never written the frickin' book, right? So it wouldn't have been written if there wasn't something to say about the Tao. And so this chapter lays down the metaphysics that you need to understand what the essence of the Tao is, right? So you can understand the essence of the Tao even if you can't actually touch it, see it, feel it, or perceive it in any way. So when we look at that, then we can go into the text and understand some things. Number one, okay, the Tao, you try to state it as such, not the one that always exists. What does that mean? It means that there are Fei Chang Dao. There are non-constant types of Dao. That's a road. That's the right way of doing things. Is this a high-level diss against Confucius? I don't know. But one thing for sure can be said. You can state a path. You can state a way of doing things. You can state a correct thing. It's just that that thing is subject to change and transformation. And therefore, eventually it goes up in smoke and it disappears, right? But what that means that's very important is that the Tao is not subject to change and it's not subject to transformation. So this is the first clue about the nature of the Tao and what it is, right? It's the Chang Dao. It's the always existing Tao. It's the permanent Tao, right? So this gives us an idea about how we can start to get a vantage point from which to understand how this thing operates. Now, the second passage, 命可名非常名, right? So the name which can be named is not the constant name. Well, the name here, okay, I think it's the permanent name of the Tao, right? The idea here being, as soon as you can tie it down as a phenomenon, then it's no longer able to be the original prerequisite of all being. Because philosophically in Taoism, now I'm jumping way ahead here because it doesn't say this in this chapter, but I know a little bit about Taoist philosophy, so I'll just run to the chase. In Taoist philosophy, the basic idea is that the power of the Tao creating all things encapsulates all things, and therefore it is beyond the realm of phenomena, because every possible phenomena exists within what the Tao has created. Therefore, the Tao is a non-phenomena. It's let's say, it's a phenomenon that doesn't have any phenomenological quality insofar as it's intangible, permanently intangible. Therefore, any time that you try to tie it down as an extant happening thing, it is not there, and it just goes up in smoke. It's gone. So Dao ke Dao, Fei Chang Dao, Ming ke Ming, Fei Chang Ming, right? That's the the key point, right? It's not able to be stated as such and be permanently accurate. Ergo, it is not the real thing if you do state it as such. Now moving on, Wu Ming Tian Di Zhi Shi, right? So non-being is called the beginning of heaven and earth. Non-being is the prerequisite for being. We covered that in the last video, right? So non-being is the prerequisite for being. And so being is that which, from the perspective of the ancients, was contained inside of the world. The world is where we stand. The heavens are that which surrounds us, right? So heaven and earth in Taoism are alluding to basically the world and the atmosphere around us and all of the things that happens there, right? So us bipedal and four-foot animals and various bugs and so on, we live on the ground, and birds live on the ground in the sky, and different phenomena like the clouds move around in the sky and their water comes down to the ground and the steam goes back up to the sky, etc., right? There's a whole worldview of this in ancient China, Taoism being one of the major places where people researched it. So the prerequisite for all of that actually is the initial non-being of things. And when you look at the legends of Chinese culture about how the world was created, one of the major legends is that the world was created, the universe was first created as a giant egg resting in emptiness, in cosmic space, right? And so this egg has a living thing inside of it, which is born, Pangu, and then Pangu generates the world, right? So that's one of the creation myths. And so the idea here is that the world before it's created, it's suspended in absolute nothingness. But that nothingness, as you'll see, generates beingness, right? So being is generated from nothing. And so it goes on to say, You Ming. So being is called Wan Wu Zhi Mu, the mother of all things, the mother of the myriad beings. So for the world to be created, it has to be born first of a prerequisite nothingness, right? So the argument here is material reality hasn't permanently existed. material reality was preceded by non-material non-existence, and then that created material reality. Thus there was a being, and the being was the thing, the mother, that incubated and generated all of the myriad phenomena in the world, basically. So then that's another piece of information that we have about the Tao, right? There's something here related to being and non-being, and being seems to be the incubator. Non-being seems to be the incubator of being, and being seems to be the mother which generates all things in the world, right? So there's some activity of the Tao happening here related to being and non-being, right? Remember, this is one chapter, right? So these ideas are all connected. It's not the Tao can't be spoken. Here's a bunch of other stuff that's not related to the Tao. All of these things are somehow related to the Tao. Otherwise, they wouldn't put them in the same chapter, right? The people who wrote this were very, very, very coherent. So, and I say people who wrote this were very coherent because we don't know factually who wrote the Dao De Jing, right? Lao is perhaps a legendary figure. People say that he was a person named Li Er, who may or may not have existed, but other people say he might have been someone named Lao Dan, right? Nobody knows for sure. So I say the people who wrote the Dao De Jing because I assume it was probably a collected number of different essays that were compiled over a few hundred years. But hey, I don't know. Don't sue me. So then it says, 孤常无余, right? So thus, if you are always without desire, 一观其妙, so then you can observe its miracle, or that which is subtle about it. I also like to say you can observe its subtlety, right? Because what you're really doing, if you're without desire, is you're putting aside your personal prejudices which come from trying to obtain things and being mentally stuck on that state of wishing to grasp or get things, right? So one of the main arguments of the Dao De Jing is that your desire is getting in the way of your ability to clearly perceive the nature of reality. So if you can always be without desire, then you can see that which is miraculous or that which is subtle, because miao does mean subtle, or doesn't mean miraculous, but it also means like small, minute, subtle, and hard to make tangible, right? It's a pretty profound idea. So if you can push all your desire away, then you can see that most subtle aspect of reality, which would make you aware of this relationship between non-being and being. 常有欲观其角. So if you always have desire, then you're always on the border, you're always on the outer perimeter, right? So if your mind gets distracted all the time, you can't see what's present that would inform you about the nature of being and non-being, thus informing you about this intangible nameless Tao, right? So at the start of the text, they're already telling you, you have to practice some exercise which will cause you to give up your desires in favor of being able to see things as they really are. It cannot be done through words, right? So they're already setting the frame to make you understand that you have to enter into meditative consciousness to be able to appreciate the nature of non-being and being, ergo understand something about the Tao. So now the next part, it says 测量, these two things. So the two things again are non-being and being. 通出, right? They leave together are 异名, right? They're differently named. So non-being is clearly different from being. Being is clearly different from non-being. Cao Zhenyang, who was the abbot of the White Cloud Temple, very famous Taoist temple, wrote a, let's say he did an annotation of the Dao De Jing, which was based on another one, but he added some of his own ideas. And he said, non-being and being, they seem opposite, but they're like siblings and they go everywhere together, right? There's emptiness in the sky, which allows things which are full, like, bodies to fill the sky, right? The human body, it seems to be full and robust, but there's all these different empty places in the body that allow for the movement of, fluids and air and all this different stuff, right? Emptiness and fullness, they're always engaged in this dance together, where non-being and being, these two things that leave the Tao together are inexorably connected permanently, right? So that's the basic idea there. Then he says tong wei zhi xuan, right? So together their meaning is a mystery, because this intangible Tao, this ineffable Tao that we can't speak, it's very mysterious, not something we can use our logical faculties to understand, insofar as we can't grasp it as an intellectual exercise. So, facts and logic aren't going to help us to understand the deeper questions of reality. Those things are maybe somewhat experientially possible, but even then it's shrouded in great mystery, right? So, I don't know about facts and logic in other contexts, but in that context, they're not very useful. So then xuan zhi you xuan, right? Mystery and then more mystery. So again, you want to know about mystery, look at the last video, shameless self-promotion, right? Go check it out now. But this mystery, it seems deep, and then it's deeper, right? Because, it is impossible to go back to the origin of the universe and experience it, because we don't have the capacity to reduce ourselves to non-being and still have a coherent psychological awareness or ability to discern things, right? So then it says, 钟苗之门. However, that deep mystery is actually the gateway to all wonders of the world, all miracles of the world, right? Everything actually comes out of the relationship between non-being and being, which are generated by the Tao. So the Tao, in later Taoist culture, so by about the 1500s, people were saying, well, the Tao is like the utmost absolute of non-being, or at least it's contained within the utmost absolute of non-being. And so the non-being that it spits out together with being is like a lesser gradation of non-being, essentially. And again, that's not naming the Tao, right? Because it's not a phenomenon. You can't name a non-phenomenon, right? All you can say is it seems to be contained in the absolute utmost of non-being. Now, hopefully we get at least a couple of people who are somewhat familiar with Western philosophy, and they might come along and say, well, look, this is kind of solipsistic drivel, right? Because what you're essentially, well, I don't know, is it really solipsism? Maybe not. Anyway, what do I know about Western philosophy? Absolutely nothing. But they might make some sort of criticism, right? Which would be, for instance, you say that this thing, it's completely intangible and it predates all things, but it creates everything and it creates being and non-being. Where do you get your proof to make such an axiomatic statement, right? How can you make a basic truth statement that can verify this for us? You can't. It's not possible, right? This is not something that was invented to be intelligent or witty concept. It wasn't invented to be proven by science. It wasn't invented to be proven by philosophy, right? This is an observation that people had, possibly through meditation, right? We can't say for sure if that's true, possibly through meditation. But it was some sort of profound observation that people had, that before we are cognizant of reality existing, before anyone was cognizant of reality of existing, there was a before time, right? So measure your own life. Do you remember the time before you were born? Now, I mean, surely we're going to get a few people who say, oh yeah, I remember before I was Napoleon. in my last life. I was Joan of Arc. I was Taylor Swift, because we're living in multi-dimensional timeline here, right? I could be anybody. But I think, to be fair, that most people will say, no, I don't remember before I was born. And then in that case, then sorry, here's a koan. Who were you before you were born, right? Well, okay, this suddenly has relevance to the nature of the Tao. Let's say that the universe doubtless existed before we existed, right? That would be the solipsism, right? If we say that we existed before the universe, if we say that the universe only exists because we exist, or we're the only ones here, right? That would be solipsistic. But doubtless the universe existed before we existed, right? Let's assume that to be the case. But there was perhaps a time before the universe existed. So what existed then? Even if there's a multiverse, even if the universe is on a cyclical, continual repeating pattern, right, of any of these possibilities, there was still a time before we remember. And so then the concept of the Tao suddenly becomes a little bit more useful. It becomes more realistic, right? Yeah, I don't remember what it was like before I existed. It's just a complete blank to me. It's not even contained in darkness. It's just a complete blank, right? There's nothing there. Well, that's what they're getting at, right? But you do exist. You do exist. You exist. You came to exist because of your parents. And then you were born, and now you're here. And that's a wonderful miracle. It's amazing. It's so cool that you and I exist together in this world. It's totally awesome. Mind-blowing even, right? You ever stop to think about that? Just absolutely incredible. So this Tao precondition for existing, it did happen to precede you, right? The precondition for existence preceded you. There was a first movement, a first creation of you. So that's at the individual level. Now apply it at the level of the cosmos. The cosmos had to be created by a precondition which was non-existent. It's not that the non-existence did something. It didn't say, I don't know, do I really want to offend people? I don't think so. Well, let's use an example, right? In the Old Testament, it says that Yahweh, he created the heavens and the earth, and these various different things, right? Yahweh is a precondition of existence. If you take I think it's called kaiaphatic or kaiaphatic, right? The assumption that God is an existing being who, let's say, physically intercedes in reality, then you would say, well, yeah, Yahweh has a personality. Yahweh is like a person. It's sort of an anthropomorphic God. But you can take another approach and you can say that actually I have an apophatic view of religion. So Yahweh is something way beyond, right, human consciousness, way beyond physicalized intercession in our affairs. And then you also get something ineffable, right? It's beyond the ability for us to describe. Now, there's a lot of different views of this, right? So you can't generalize and say, well, yeah, the meaning of the Tao is the same as the meaning of Yahweh. That's not true. They're different traditions. They have different ideas. But what's similar is that there's a precondition for all of existence, and then there's a precondition for all parts of existence. The Tao doesn't do anything intentionally, right? So the Tao simply is unchanging, alone, and before all existence, and all existence springs around it, right? So the first movement, or the movement of the leader, is this springing forth of being from the most profound non-being, and then you get a world with people in it, and you and me living these interesting, wonderful lives where we get to wonder about these things. So that's why it's the gateway of all wonders, right? Now, the most important thing here, right? These people are not going to write a book to tell you, yeah, there's this Tao thing. Don't think about it. Don't worry about it, right? Don't concern yourself with that. It's not worth talking about, right? If that was what they really wanted to do, it would be a much shorter book. There's 5,000 characters in the Dao De Jing talking about this concept and its applications in life, right? So we can just write people off who say that. They don't know very much about Taoism. But there must be something we can do to interact with this intangible precondition of existence, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't have mentioned it. And so that's what Taoism is about. Taoism is about how we align ourselves with the precondition of existence and what comes of it when we do that. So how we align ourselves with it ethically, for instance, right? We are less desirous to get things for ourselves that we maybe oughtn't to have. We align ourselves with it emotionally by calming and emptying our minds and being more present to experience the actual nature of things happening before us, right? Or maybe even go deeper than that, right? You might meditate until you reach a state of apophysis where you yourself are intangible, right? You forget yourself. And then you can start to experience something of what the Tao is. There's a myriad of other ways too, because what the Dao De Jing is a book that lays down the basic knowledge that you would need to be able to engage in activities that would lead you to some sort of realization of the nature of the Tao. So to tie a bow on it, even though you cannot explain what the Tao is directly, you can learn enough about it to be able to align yourself with it. And then upon aligning yourself with it, then you can begin to use it in your life to make your life exponentially better. So that's today's talk about Tao in the first chapter of the Dao De Jing. Now, we talked about mystery, we talked about Tao. Maybe next time we'll talk about non-being and being. And then, maybe a couple videos from now, we'll move on to the second chapter of the Dao De Jing. But what I want to do is take you through the book, take you through as many of the major characters and major ideas as possible, to try to lay down at least my own understanding of it. And, I can't claim that my understanding is complete. I've done a lot of legwork about it, and I think it is an okay understanding anyway, good enough to talk with you about it. So if you appreciate this video, give it a like, subscribe to my channel, and so on and so forth. It really helps me with the algorithm. And we will see you in the next one, you wonderful person who exists because of the intangible precondition of the universe.